So next is our aircraft lessor panel, and they are going to discuss the present and the future of aircraft leasing. Chairing this panel is Karen Mack of Invest Hong Kong. I'd be grateful if the panelists could please come up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining the session. In the next 30 minutes, we are going to discuss about the current lease market situation, the financing environment, as well as the new normal in the recovery and post-pandemic phase. We are honored to have four panelists joining us for discussion today. On my left is Kenneth Luke, Senior Vice President at Novus Aviation Capital. Next to him is Summer Lee, General Manager of Aviation and Haitong UT Leasing Hong Kong. And on her left is Alexander Tang, Sales Director of APAC at Global Jet Capital. On my far left is Philip Stransky, Vice President, Sales and Relationship Management of Asia, Australia, and Pacific at Macquarie Watercraft. Okay, first come first. We've been talking about aviation industry, which has been in a wide spectrum, has been facing headwind during the COVID. Understand that Kenneth and Summer, both of your companies engaged in commercial aircraft leasing industry. Will both of you share with us about how the market be affected during the COVID, and what's the challenge they are still facing, like in terms of lessor, lessee, or even the OEM manufacturer during this period? May Summer or Kenneth go first?
Sure. Thank you, Karen. I think, can I just say it's great to be back in a live conference. So hats off to Paul and team for putting it all together. You asked for a recap, really, for the year in the commercial aircraft leasing market. Some of the lawyers in the earlier session, I think, covered some of it already. But really, in a nutshell, airlines caught themselves in a crisis. They turned to the suppliers for support. Leases have seen their rent being deferred. Now, some airlines are lucky enough to have their government and shareholders supporting them. Those who have a domestic network might have fared a bit better than those who are relying on international. And those who have a fleet of freighter aircraft might have been able to utilize those to deploy them on higher yield cargo service. So all in all, airlines are finding a way for survival. Those who struggled might have gone into the restructuring or worse, bankruptcy. Hopefully, I hope we all share this in a way that I see everybody in this room have already been vaccinated. As more and more of the population get their jabs, we will get to see the end of that tunnel, hopefully.
Yeah. So, Summer, from your first-hand experience, what's your feel or experience dealing with your clients during this period?
Sure. For people who don't know us, I'm working for Haitong. We are a Chinese state-owned leasing company listed in Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So aviation is just a small part of our overall business. On the aviation side, we are still very actively looking at both the Chinese deal as well as the offshore deal. So we see the Chinese market are extremely competitive nowadays. Some of our big three Chinese clients, they switch to finance lease. So it's difficult for Western companies to bid because some of those leases are denominated in RMB, even very competitive for us to compete in the market. And for the offshore lessees, some of our lessees are still in deferral stage. The recovery has not been fully, and we are still waiting to see how they are going to develop their business. But on the commercial side, we are very actively bidding on some deals in the European market, as well as Latin America nowadays. We see the lease rate factor has been extremely competitive, even below the COVID-19 level. It's very difficult for the lessors. Because on the one side, the financing, which we will talk about later, the financing cost is going higher, but we haven't really seen it has been absorbed by the customer side. So that has been a challenge.
I see. Alex and Philip, you both, Alex, I understand that your company is engaging in a business jet, and Philip, yours is a helicopter, so quite a niche market. How is these two market performance during this period, and well, are they more resilient? Maybe Alex first.
Okay, I'll go first. So, hi, Karen, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Alex from Global Jet Capital. I think I belong to the next panel, but I think this panel is equally as important because Global Jet Capital is a financing company for business jets. Aside from loan and finance lease products, we are one of the very few provider for operating lease for business jets. So here I am, and thanks guys, thanks for having me. And then, in terms of business aviation, as general public's expectation, I would say, the market for business aviation is very, very resilient, despite COVID, even more so. And then, even though most of the country closed their borders, a few things we spotted and observed is that one, people who needed to travel throughout the COVID times really shifted from commercial aviation to business aviation for obvious reasons. One, it's easier to access. Second is that for their safety concerns and to avoid unnecessary contacts. And then the demand, we really observed that the demand for business aviation really shifted from a lot of new aircraft into a pre-owned aircraft because there are more and more new buyers and new users of private aviation that's coming into the market. And now we are seeing a record low of inventories with respect to second-hand aircraft. And then we are seeing stability in aircraft valuation throughout COVID. So, a lot of activities were driven by new entrants of the business jet aviation market. And then we really started, ever since COVID, that happened early last year, I would say, we really started seeing improvement in the second half of 2020. And then this is largely driven by charter operation and fractional ownership. So that's a little bit of something that we observed.
So, Philip, will there be any demand changes of your service during COVID?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me up here. So in Macquarie, we actually have several aviation platforms, one of which is a fixed-wing platform, but I represent the rotary-wing platform. And I think what's interesting about the rotary-wing platform is that most of our clients operate in what we call mission-critical services. And these mission-critical services seem to be unaffected for the most part by COVID. So not that they're one of our clients, but as a simple example, if you were to look outside today, you probably would have seen GFS's helicopters fly by. GFS is the Hong Kong government's service. GFS will fly regardless of COVID. In the same way, a lot of our clients are either police, hospitals, or oil and gas companies that need to take employees out to platforms. That being said, they definitely had to adapt to COVID. So when COVID came about, we definitely saw flight hours go down. We saw a number of our clients try and learn at how to fly people out in close proximity. But we're happy that in a year down the road, flight hours are back up to where they were at the beginning of COVID. That being said, the helicopter industry itself had a downturn several years ago. And so we learned a lot in that downturn that prepared us for COVID. So when COVID came about, we were already very close to a lot of our clients as a result of the downturn. We already knew what the leases said because we had to deal with a number of potentially contentious issues in the past. And so while nobody wanted COVID, I think we were already kind of geared up and ready to go to act appropriately.
Thanks for sharing with us more about the helicopter market. Yeah, we all know that aviation aviation industry is a capital incentive business, so it's very important for lessor, lessee, or aircraft to get access to the capital. Also, Summer and Kenneth, how do you see the financiers' appetite during the on aviation credit during this period? And we also noticed that there is an increasing number of activity on the sales and leaseback transaction. Will that be implied that there is increasing gravities of leasing business in the provision of financing going forward? Summer?
Sure. So we work with both the Chinese banks as well as the Western banks. So for the Western banks, we have seen they are in a conservative mode because they are now willing to increase their aviation exposure, maybe compared with shipping, container leasing, or some other sectors of the whole banking business. Aviation has not been like the flavor of the month still. So they are limiting the exposure for aviation in general sense. And also for single airlines, we see like the ticket size has been coming down. For example, if we are bidding on SLBs, previously the banks may be willing to finance up to 4 aircraft. Now they may be down to 1 or 2 aircraft, as well as there's a lower LTV. The margin may be higher, but because of the swap rate is lower than before, so the all-in cost may be slightly higher, but that has not been much difference. So on the Chinese banking side, we see they are still supporting, especially like state-owned companies like the Chinese airlines, as well as the Chinese-backed lessors like us. Because of the Chinese sector size, you know, has been recovering pretty well. But as a lessor, we need to say it's very important to have a strong shareholder. The non-recourse financing has been very difficult with very high pricing. And as well as the lessors needs to diversify their source of funding, we have been using a lot of secondary market, capital market as our financing tool as well.
I see. Kenneth, obviously your shareholder is a private individual, so will you also see that there is an increase in involvement of like private equity, even family office or hedge fund getting involved in the provision of financing in the industry?
I think you're touching a very niche market there, and they tend to be opportunistic where the returns are. So yes, I would very much like to see more involvement, which means there's a comeback on the business, on the sector where returns lie. But I also see there's no stopping of financing of where our deals would need that. You see the traditional aviation finance banks, you know, they're still open for business. Yes, maybe there's more interest on new deliveries with stronger credit, but they're still there, and there's very much supporting the industry. Yes, maybe there are a very, very small handful of aviation banks that are shutting down their aviation desk, but you know, it doesn't reflect quite the market. There's still quite a lot of liquidity out there supporting the deliveries.
I see. So how about the business jet and the helicopter side? Is it the leasing also a popular form of financing?
So just as commercial aviation, leasing has a big role in the future of business aviation, we believe. Fairly speaking, we know that there will always be persons or people and companies that will use their cash or loan to fund their business jet acquisition. However, we do believe that, we do see that there are increasing number of companies or customers that's getting into operating lease on business jets. So, you know, a few advantages of operating lease on business jet is that, one, the greater privacy. Second is that a lot of people choose to preserve their capital and bank lines to support a business jet with the operating lease. And third is that, you know, there's a minimal on a residual risk. So a lot of people are in favor of that as well because they don't need to dispose their aircraft at the end of the lease tenure. So when they're done with the aircraft, they just give it back to us, and then we'll take care of the rest. So that's one. And then in terms of funding, I think we're capitalized by private equity as well. So we're not sponsored by banks. However, I would say we do look to be more self-sufficient by issuing asset-backed securities. So we just closed our 5th ABS back in March. So in terms of that, I think we are trying to bridge the gap between cost of funding and real world expectation from the customers.
On the helicopter side, it's slightly different. I mean, I work for a bank, and our competitors are somewhat the same. What I would say is the space itself has gone through a kind of a contraction in the last couple of years. When we started this business, which we call the new generation lessor, so in essence, emulating what you do in the fixed wing world on the rotary side, we're only going back, the better part of 10 years. Before that, it was really operators that were leasing to other operators. And what we found through the last 10 years and through kind of our cycles is that we just have a different way of doing business. But bigger is not necessarily better. It really focuses on, exactly what helicopters you have in your portfolio, exactly what manufacturers. There are more manufacturers than there are in the fixed wing world. There are more end uses. It's much harder to change helicopters from one world to another. So really that initial investment decision plays a big part in it all. So yeah, we do operating leases. There are some finance leases out there. People are open for business, but what we found ever since COVID, thankfully, is that it is much harder to do business. So lease rates are going up. There's a little bit less competition out there, which is really good for the market as a whole.
Okay. So a follow-up question. Hong Kong is an international financial market. So in provision of financing, how do you see Hong Kong's role going forward in helping lessor airlines getting the capital? Summer, Haitong's been listed in Hong Kong, has been raised a number of debt issuing Asia, China. What's your view on that?
Yeah, on the aviation side, we have been using Hong Kong platform for like our previous deal, including our airlines in China, in Qatar, in Indonesia. We have been able to tap into like the Hong Kong structures. And on the financing side, because we are a listed company like in Hong Kong, and our balance sheet is over $13 billion, and we are rated investment rating on the very top level by like the Haitong Group. So we are able to like issue continuously like this kind of secondary market or capital market activities. And also our affiliate companies is called Haitong International Securities. They are the #1 securities house in China. Their business are doing really well in the last 2 years due to the capital market booming like in Hong Kong. So we are able to benefit from that part as well.
Yeah, thank you, Summer. So and anything Kenneth want to add on the role of Hong Kong as playing as a financing role?
Well, for us, Novus, we've been here in Hong Kong for a good 6-7 years now. We've always been interested in Hong Kong being developed as more of a leasing hub here. I know COVID does slow down a little bit on its development on the market as a whole, but what we like to see is Hong Kong being worked on more with the different maybe tax incentives with the different countries on the withholding taxes, so we can see more and more of an opportunity there for us to use Hong Kong as a leasing hub here.
That's good. So for the helicopter and business jet, comparatively speaking, it's require relatively less amount of capital. And on that, will the family office or the kind of private equity, which Hong Kong is also an important hub for family office and fund management center, help those financing for the business jet and the helicopter? What do you see?
Okay, so for Hong Kong, we really just opened our office back in early of 2019. So we really see Hong Kong as an important hub for us to tap into the Asia Pacific market. And right now, the Asia Pacific market is actually, the background of our business is we're a US company. And then we really started doing business in Asia Pacific back in 2017 when we closed the first transaction in the region. And then now Asia Pacific has been the second largest, I would say, region by growth in terms of our portfolio. So we really see Hong Kong as an important place in terms of ease to communicate with our local customers and then ease of transport. And then we can really get to where our customers base at in a very, very short amount of time when pre-COVID. So in terms of funding, Hong Kong is also a very important, I would say, region for us because because as I mentioned earlier, we do try to be self-sufficient through issuing ABS. So we do a lot of starting 2020. We do early 2020. We did a few roadshows on selling our securities, and then we do see that more and more Asia Pacific investors are interested in our ABS product because it is very resilient because all the aircraft that is in our portfolio are backed by ultra high net worth individual credits or large corporation credits. So this is actually a very attractive kind of product for the investor here as well. So we really think Hong Kong is a very, very good place for us to show our presence and be more and bring our product into the platform.
You want to add anything?
I won't add very much other than say I think private equity is always involved if they think there's a buck to be made. So private equity has absolutely been in our space. I worked for a private equity-backed startup when I started in the helicopter leasing space, and they continue to be kind of active. I think the space has learned a lot through the last couple cycles, and so it'll limit which private equities come back in. As far as ultra-high net worth individuals, it doesn't really play a part in our space at all, unfortunately.
Thanks, Philip. Well, this question. So with the availability of the vaccine, the industry is now more focused on recovery. So we see there is a V-shaped recovery on the domestic traffic in US, China, Mexico, and even in Russia. So in terms of recovery and growth, which region do you think will benefit most? And do you also see there is a simultaneous improvement in the lease rate? And if there is any, to what extent, going along with this recovery? Yeah. Kenneth?
Sure. This is a bit I get quietly envious of my colleagues during the weekly team calls, as Europe and the Americas, they seem to have a healthy pipeline of transactions coming back. Areas there, countries, they see some recovery already. Whereas here in Asia Pacific, Hong Kong has been doing very well lately. It's a very encouraging sign, but whereas in our neighboring region, the countries seems to have more to battle with the latest waves of COVID-19. So there's some uncertainty there, really, as here in Asia Pacific, we have our own mix of geography, distance, politics, and cultures to deal with as well. So hopefully, we'll see more of that come back as well, of the recovery, to match those we see in other areas, other regions of the world.
Summer, do you see the growth will still be in Asia and especially China?
We see the country with domestic market has been recovered pretty well, like China, US, or Mexico, like Latin America. But we have also seen some challenges in Southeast Asia countries, like there's a new lockdown in Malaysia and a semi-lockdown in Singapore. And maybe Hong Kong still not easy to fly internationally. And we see like continuously like development pending on the vaccine and also some other protection from the government.
How about the business jet market?
Yeah, in terms of business jet, since COVID, the market has been continuously growing. So especially when people have health and safety concerns when making travel plans. So we do see that there's a lot of growth in terms of fleet size and activities in the world, actually. Countries with large continents like China and the US, we have seen a big boost from traveling without having to cross the borders. The next one, we're seeing a global boost and expect that the next growth in terms of fleet size will come from Southeast Asia, because a lot of factories are shifting their production into the region, and then the local ultra-high net worth individuals are really starting being more aware of traveling with the private jet. So that's another thing we see. And, you know, in the lease market, it's always been competitive, and then we're just trying to be competitive, and then when there's more and more competitors, I would say, entering into this market.
Thanks. Philip, you have anything to add?
Yeah, of course. There's two quick things I'd like to add to that. I think, you know, as lessors, we're always trying to grow our market share and diversify our portfolio. And there's two kind of parts of that we're really focused on. One is the emergence of wind farms, specifically offshore wind farms, and even more specifically in the region. So if we look at Taiwan's going to come online in the next kind of 12 to 24 months with wind farms. Helicopters play a really important role in the maintenance of wind farms. Not so much in the construction because they're not necessarily big enough, but once a wind farm is running, you all of a sudden move people around with helicopters. Taiwan represents a small market, but on the back of Taiwan, kind of China is about to open some of the largest wind farms, offshore wind farms in the world. And then on the back of that, we see South Korea and Japan also kind of moving in that direction. So on one side, we're very excited about that as a potential growth. We already have aircraft doing that, and we look to have more. The other side is going back to the mission critical part that I talked about. With changing weather patterns, we see both in northern and southern hemisphere that there are more extreme temperatures. And as a result of that, if we go back, I think it was last year, Australia had some of the worst forest fires they've ever had. US had some of the worst forest fires we've ever had. So what we see is governments freeing money to put assets at their disposition to be able to fight those forest fires. Again, a really niche market, but it's something that we hope that we can help with going forward.
That's right. So on the macroeconomic front, we have people anticipating there is a interest rate hike scenario. Under this inflationary expectation, how is it going to affect the lessor and lessee situation? Will there be interest rate hike more favored to lessor than the lessee?
Well, of course, we are aviation focused here, but I think if you look at the overall economy, there are other sectors that are already picking up quite a good recovery, and that puts some sort of a upward pressure on inflation, and comes with that interest rate hike and the borrowing cost increase. Those will affect airlines because within the last year they really have a tough time trying to hold on to the cash that they had or had to borrow more money. So if any increase in the interest rates would only make it worse for them, really. If I'm the rating agencies or the credit committees, I'll be looking to these companies, the airlines, how well they have the leverage or how able they will be to repay on those debt. So I think from my point of view, my concern would be more on whether I see the airlines would be able to weather that storm and to repay on those debt that they've built up, really.
That's very true. Summer, how will your company prepare for the interest rate scenario?
And I totally agree with Kenneth because we see some of the other industry, they benefit, like the banking industries or like the insurance industries, they will be able to benefit from the inflation, and also some of the industries like the healthcare, they are able to pass some of the higher costs to customers. But for airlines, if you think of their business model, like the products is pretty standard and very similar to each other. So it's maybe very difficult for them to pass on like the total cost of the inflation to the customers. As well as for the lessors, if the lessors cannot have a very unique product and also the lessors are very desperate of deploying new capitals into the market, it may also be difficult to pass on those costs to the lessee.
I see. So it very much depends on the recovery and the house market going to be after COVID. So Alex, do you have anything to add?
Mm-hmm. So I think I'll go ahead. So I think we're, from our perspective, we're still in the early days of recovery, so there will be a lot of uncertainty. So with that uncertainty, we don't think there's going to be a big change, however, from the economic front. However, as the vaccines roll out and big corporations are returning to normal operation, we're probably not going to see a big change in terms of that. We do think that cash is going to still going to be a strong alternative, as both corporates and individuals have added a lot of liquidity in the past 12 months. Just see the stock markets being skyrocketing. And then also, we do think that, we also continuously think that low fixed rates will continue to be available broadly with credit, with clients that have very, very good credit. So that's our view.
I'd agree with that. I think if you're, it depends who you are in terms of on the client matrix, right? If you're a client with great credit, you'll probably get a cheaper rate than if you're a client that doesn't have as good credit. And it'll be a case-by-case basis. But things will get more expensive.
Yeah, there's really a matter of risk and return. So the last question in the interest of time. So what do you expect the landscape of leasing industry be post-pandemic? What would you like to see the lease term will be under the new normal after the pandemic? And actually, what critical changes you will see we have to make so that we can better face the future? Anyone? So will the lease term be required to be shortened to reduce the risk? Is there any other rules elements built in the lease term when you are conducting new business?
Well, I walked in here today hoping to find the answer to that, really. When do we see some normality again, or do we see the same normality as we know of it? That's really the question, because it's just not so visible at the moment. But from what I see now, lease rate and sell and leaseback opportunities, or in general, airlines do have a choice when they come to financing. There's still a lot of liquidity, a lot of interested parties in bidding for a handful of deals, especially the ones with good credits and like I said, new deliveries. So it's still very much an airline's world when they get to choose on the new delivery financing. Who knows? When all this eventually settles, there will be changes, but I guess for me it's still too early to say.
So Summer, do you expect any changes?
So on a general level, we may see some consolidation in the industry, or some of the players, they want to exit, and some of the new money, or like the smart investors, they coming in because aviation is a cyclical sector. And on the leasing side, we would like to see some of the changes because aviation, they haven't really been adopted to the new technology like many other industries. A lot of our leasing products are still very standard. So if we are able to add more like perspectives to like the leasing elements, we hope like we can create some unique products for the customers.
Yeah, I think for us, it's very much like Philip. It depends on the customer, what kind of business they're running, what kind of projects they're running, what kind of credit they are. It really depends on what kind of turn they're getting. So, if a company that has a very strong credit, we can of course issue a very, very good rate for them, very good lease rate for them. However, what we're really trying to do is to bring our cost of funding and liquidity, cost of funding down and liquidity up, so we can better support, I would say, the region in terms of, providing more aircraft into the region.
In the helicopter space, we're looking forward to some more consolidation, both on the operator and on the lessor side. I think the other part that we're looking forward to is maybe a readjustment of where the risk lies. What we've seen in the past is that the risk gets passed down the chain directly to the lessor, and we're looking at passing some of that operational risk or contractual risk back up to the actual party that's putting those contracts in place. Of course, that takes time. That takes a lot of effort on behalf of the market as a whole, and as long as there's a lot of competition out there, it's very hard to do. So we look forward to potentially a little bit less competition to be able to get better returns.
Okay, thank you, Philip, for that. And any other issue you want to address or to any other takeaway? for the audience? Okay,
Thank you.
thanks all for joining us for the session. Kenneth, Summer, Alex, and Philip. Thanks again.
Thank you.